Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. The topic of this 10-minute moan is the predicted reaction from SNP former MPs who lost their seats, right? Now, before this election had been voted on, I predicted, because I know it's going to happen, that some of previous SNP MPs are going to come out and give us a tirade of exactly what's happened in their party. Now, Joanna Cherry is the sort of first or the biggest name to do that so far, and she done plenty of it on election night when she lost her seat and the cameras were pointing at her and put a microphone. The most hilarious one was ITV's coverage, where Nicola Sturgeon was sitting in the studio, listened to this tirade, and you could see her face. It was absolutely, at one point, they split the TV screen in two, and they had Nicola on one side and Johanna Cherry on the other. It was comedy gold, right? However, this is just the start of it. Believe me, right? I didn't actually think Johanna Cherry would have lost her seats. And to be perfectly honest with you, if I could have picked the 9 SNP MPs that should get the 9 seats that are available to them at Westminster right now, she would have probably got one, right? Because although I don't like her independence stance, there's a lot of extra that I totally agree with her. Like what a woman is, for example, right? That's a cracking start, right? She's one of the few SNP MPs that actually knew what a woman was and was able to talk out about her fears for the safety of women because of the rise of the transgender movement to let them like pee in women's toilets and such. So anyway, this isn't the end of that. This is just the start of previous SNP MPs coming out to tell the nation exactly what this decrepit party is like. Now, I've already done a whistleblower podcast with a girl, Shannon, who was SNP activist. Her mum was once an SNP MP, and her partner is a councillor for Alba, who used to be and was voted in as a SNP councillor. So very, very well placed to tell some home truths about how that party works. And I'll be delighted to give anybody that's wanting a camera and a microphone to give more than the 2 minutes that they'll get in the mainstream TV or the couple of inches they'll get in a newspaper about what they really think of the SNP and its internal workings. Have my platform. It's all yours, right? And I am a unionist. But I do agree with some people who are not unionists and political views they have outside the referendum question, right? And I understand that a lot of you are actually not cult members, like the absolute loony brigade, that buy every single word that this decrepit party give them, right? So I'm more than happy to talk to people that are not unionists because that's healthy. And I'm quite happy to give you a camera and a microphone, and as long as you want, to tell your truths, okay? Anyway, I'm going to go and give you some details from the Herald article. Now, this is one of many that's written about this today, and they've done a sort of follow-up on the Joanna Cherry story, because Blackford's come out and basically said Joanna Cherry's just upset, right? And she's talking a lot of nonsense. Well, the Herald have given her the right to retort to that. But what I think will happen with the Joanna Cherry story is the papers have now had a couple of 3 days of the Joanna Cherry story, and that'll be about the end of it, right? They'll be moved on to something else tomorrow. So this will probably be the last day we get any newspapers picking up on her story, and I think she deserves more time and a platform where she can tell her whole story, because there's more to come from her, and there's more to come for other people. Believe me, this isn't the end of the SNP or shite story from people that used to represent the SNP, okay? So the Herald went with the headline, Cherry rejects Blackford put down of her as bitter. Great story by Kathleen Nutt, the political correspondent for the Herald. Joanna Cherry has hit back at Iain Blackford after her former boss described her as bitter. The SNP's former Westminster leader, who stood down as an MP at the general election, made the description of Miss Cherry, who lost her seat on Thursday, in a newspaper interview today. He was commenting after Miss Cherry put the blame for the SNP humiliating defeat on Thursday onto him and First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. She said the two politicians had failed to capitalise on Brexit and Boris Johnson's unpopularity in Scotland while he was Prime Minister, in order to push forward the independence cause. Now, this is funny because this is exactly the same as Alex Salmond said maybe about a month ago in an interview, in a couple of interviews actually, where he was like, the SNP should have went to town with them because they were weak. So this is Joanna Cherry now replicating Alex Salmond's words, which is very interesting. Anyway, where did we get to? She added that neither Sturgeon nor Blackford had fostered internal debate in the party. Now, this is a thing that we've all heard of, and we all probably could see from the outside, that party is not a party. That party is a dictatorship or a cabal within the party that do everything for the party. And in her words, have fostered, they had not fostered internal debate in the party. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? In response to Miss Cherry's comments on election night, Mr. Blackford told the Sunday Mail, she's just someone who is bitter, never mind losing her seat. I have to look at everything I did when I was Westminster leader, and of course I did have a good relationship with Nicola. You're no kidding us, mate. That's why you were a leader of Westminster. Should I have pushed more in certain things? I don't know, says Blackford. Writing on X, formerly Twitter, earlier today, Miss Cherry said, knowing Blackford, I am not bitter at all. For me, this is something of a liberation. Although I feel awful for my staff, it's time the truth of the last decade was told. And I mean in full truth, including your leadership's failings and appalling behaviour towards me. Now, I'm quite sure Ms. Cherry could demand a bigger platform than mine. However, I'm more than willing to allow her all the time she needs to tell us the full truth, as she calls it, about the leadership failings and appalling behaviour towards her. I'm up for a bit of that. And if anybody knows her and can reach out to her, tell her she can have all the time she wants on my platform. And I totally understand she might have bigger fish than me to fry, but it's there if needed. Miss Cherry was famously sacked from the party's Westminster front benches under Mr. Blackford's leadership after she disagreed with him and Miss Sturgeon's direction, particularly over gender reform laws. Right? Because Miss Cherry was one of these people that could actually see where this was going. Guess why? I believe she's LGB. And a lot of them understood where this was going because they've seen it before with their rainbows and their pride marches and all that. So she was probably better placed than Mr. Blackford to have an opinion on this. And guess what? Her opinion seems to be right. Mr. Blackford and Ms. Sturgeon's seems to be wrong. Speaking to Fourth One News in the early hours of Friday, the former SNP for Edinburgh South West said, I think our vote got squeezed on two sides. On one side, those of our supporters who passionately believe in the cause of Scottish independence feel like we have not done enough, and I think they are right about that. What I've been saying for ages. SNP have ruined the country for unionists and those in the middle who are undecided on independence, but they have also ruined the dreams of the nationalists. Miss Cherry appears to be thinking the same as me. History will show the major opportunities were squandered by Nicola Sturgeon and Iain Blackford during the Brexit years and during the Boris years. Miss Cherry said that she was dismayed to hear Miss Sturgeon, who appeared on ITV as an election commentator, talking about the party in the third person, as if she has nothing to do with it and not taking any responsibility for what's happened to the party tonight. I think that's a fair assessment. I was flicking between channels and I was on a couple of podcasts myself, so I wasn't sat in front of telly watching all of anybody's coverage, but that's the kind of feeling I got for the bits of the ITV coverage I did see. Faced with criticism of her leadership, Miss Sturgeon appeared to blame Mr. Swinney's campaign. Quoted, I think for anybody in the current leadership to sort of take refuge in somehow it's all my fault would just be taking the easy solution or response to this rather than looking seriously and a hard look at what the real issues are, she said. The SNP had, in Nicola Sturgeon's words, left himself between two stools on the independence question. She said, adding that placing the Constitution on the front page of the party manifesto was never followed through on the sort of day-to-day basis in the campaign. I actually agree with that. They just made this shout about we lived up to our promise that we made at the party convention when Humza got up and said, we'll put independence front and centre, page 1, line 1 of a manifesto. Well, you did. But then this big manifesto you had one paragraph about how you were going to achieve it, and that was totally unmanageable. Nobody would agree to the terms that you put down as how you were going to get independence. However, In his interview with the Sunday Mail, Mr Blackford said First Minister John Swinney must show voters he can be trusted as a First Minister after a very clear message was sent to the SNP in the general election results. Mr Blackford, who led the SNP in the Commons between 2017 and 2022, appeared to back Mr Swinney's leadership, but added, isn't really anybody else. There really isn't anybody else who could take on the job. We told you that, right? The party do not have a leader. If John Swinney is genuinely the best person you could find to be up there as your leader, then he's a mental and you don't have much of a skill pool, okay? The problem you've got is you've got a wee cabal and only the ones in that groovy gang that the cabal like get any positions, and it's came back to haunt you. It comes after the SNP fell to just 9 seats at Westminster, down from the 48 they won in 2019. The party was dealt a further blow on Saturday afternoon when the final UK constituency seat, Inverness, Skye and West Ross-shire, was taken by the Lib Dems. While the seat is new under boundary changes, it encompasses part of former Liberal Democrat leader Charles Kennedy, which was Ross, Skye and Lochaber seat, which was lost to Mr Blackford in 2015. Mr Blackford said the results showed the electorate had delivered a very clear message, adding, they're pissed off, right? You're no kidding me. Everybody's sick of you. He said, you can sugarcoat any of this. You can't sugarcoat any of this. It's up to John what the party does, but the electorate have delivered a very clear message to us. Primarily, they're pissed off. I don't think anyone is pointing the finger at John and saying he has to go. The reason they're saying he doesn't have to go is you've got nobody to put in his place. He's inherited this and he has to own it in terms of fixing it. It's not long until 2026. You've got some time and it can be turned around, but you need to demonstrate that you can be trusted. Asked by the publication if Mr Swinney would be able to turn the party's fortunes around, he said, time will tell, but there isn't really anybody else, so he's the man for it, right? They're a shambles, right? They're an absolute shambles. So what he's basically saying is, John didn't cause this, but he's got to deal with it, because there's nobody else really can deal with it. So just fling him under a bus, right? Just let John cope with it, and then in 2026 we'll blame him, and then by that point we'll either be bankrupt or we'll not have any seats, so it'll no matter, we'll not actually need a leader. And there's this, like, just pure denial to accept anybody to say, do you know what? The party's stinking, right? The party is absolutely stinking. And I'm delirious about this, right? Because I'm obviously a unionist. Right? I'm delighted to see the SNP faltering right now, but I just want to see them die, right? Because even the nationalists deserve a better home than this mob, right? So, go and have a look at their books. Their finances are buggered, right? They're going to lose £7.5 million over the next 5 years from the money they were in their income line in this year, because that's tied to the amount of seats you have in Westminster. They can't get through this, and not one person in the mainstream is asking the question about their finances. Now, their accounts are due out any day now, because they'll have, I think last year they were put in today, the 7th of the 7th last year, into the Electoral Commission, but a few weeks before that information is publicly available and people can have a wee look at it. But that set of accounts is a calendar year but finished in December, the end of December. And that's based on the money that they've just lost there at Westminster, because that money will be in there just now. That'll not be in for the next 5 years. So it doesn't matter how bad their accounts come out, they're going to get worse, right? They'll lose members. Nobody's giving them donations now anyway, right? And they lost the last set of accounts that came out last year, which was for 2022. They had an £800,000 deficit with it being an election year. They've just ran an election. Now, I know they spend fortunes, but they spent something like £500,000 in a convention in 2022's accounts. Probably done the same in the 2023 accounts. They can't go on financially. So, it's a big... Imagine being John Swinney, right? Imagine being the guy that's committed his whole adult life to this decrepit party, and he's the guy at the helm when it goes bankrupt, right? He's at the helm, and it's probably took one of, if not their biggest, probably has to be their biggest electoral defeat ever. But he'll have the keys when the whole thing implodes, financially and morally, right? What a gig you've got, John. You're finished. That's how you'll go down in history. Now, I might be wrong, right, but I'm quite happy to accept that you are the leader that's overseen the worst defeat of the SNP in the history of elections, right? And there's a very good chance you're going to be the leader in charge when the penny drops and the auditors, what do you call them? Liquidators come in. Administrators first, aye. When administrators need a phone call. But I don't know how you're pulling it off, because whoever's in charge of your accounts knows they're insolvent right now. And if you are in charge of a business that you know is insolvent, and you are like an accountant, there's certain legal obligations you've got, but your party don't play by normal legal obligations. Your party are stinking. So, this is just going to get more fun, right? Because there's more people out there wanting to tell folk how bad the SNP are, right? And I told you this would happen. I told you this would happen a fortnight ago or even a month ago. I said, watch what happens when they lose seats and they've got MPs that are no MPs anymore, and they don't like the party. They had to remain silent to a certain degree while they were in place. Now the shackles are off all these people. Watch what happens next. Okay? If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please consider subscribing. But most important of all, unless you're SNP, the decrepit cabal that run them, or the ever-decreasing number of cult members that still support them and buy into every bit of shite they tell. See everybody else, have a great day. Cheery, bye now.